Question from a viewer. How did you get your child to read so perfectly at 3? And the follow-up is, what if your child is not a fast talker? Let's say they're just learning how to talk at 3. Do you overlook their inability to speak clearly and, try to push through to teach them how to read? So my answer to this question is, first of all, how we got Charlie to read so well at 3 years old is really by a very intuitive approach, I would say, which is like by reading. So we taught him how to read by reading. We read to him like just probably exactly what you would imagine. Like if I pull a book, off Charlie's desk, bear on a bike, and I would just literally point out the words, bear on a bike, bear on a bike. And then I would show him, we read the book together, and we would read the same books over and over again. So I might read this book to him like countless times until he could almost memorize it. And like there are books that he was memorizing, in part or in full. And you might think to yourself, well, memorization is not reading, which is, partly true. But it's still helpful, I think, in the learning to read process, because there are sight words, right? Which are words that we just memorize by looking at them. And so by reading the same book over and over again and letting them start to recognize those words that they're seeing over and over again, they're accumulating sight words. And that builds their confidence, right? That they can recognize words. So it starts to, make reading a little bit more exciting for them. And without going into too much detail, actually, because I don't want this answer to be overly long, but that would be like my number one advice is just read to your child, like sit them close to you. Don't just read to them and have them playing out, Sometimes you can do that too, though, but really intentionally, like sit them on your lap or sit them next to you and like literally point out the words to them and let them follow along with you and read the same books over and over again and do it regularly and do some basic phonics, B says B, D says D, P says P, or P. So that's basically how we taught him how to read. To answer the next part of your question, if your child is just learning how to talk at 3, that's totally fine. This is not a race, okay? It's not a competition. Charlie doesn't get a prize for learning to read at 3. It's just like, that's how his life happened to turn out. And so I bless God for that. But if he had learned to read at 6, it would be just as well. Some kids I've heard even learn to read later, but when they learn, they really pick up fast is what I've heard from other parents who had late readers. So for example, Thomas and I went to a homeschooling conference recently, and one of the parents was saying that their child didn't learn to read till 8 years old. I think it was 8 years old. And that was okay, no stress. And once they learned how to read, they read. It's like, it's not really a skill you can take back from them, It's kind of like learning to ride a bike, but even stronger than that, because the bike you may pick up later in life, you may not. But reading is everywhere, all around you, all the time. So once you learn how to read, you don't unlearn it, like you don't forget it, So it's with you always. So I feel like don't stress about it. And yes, I would read to my child, even if they're not talking well or whatever. Like you can use the tips that I gave you at any age. So yeah, it's not dependent on how old they are. You just start with them, and don't have like any deadlines, because again, this is such an early age. Like you don't need to stress about it. So it's totally fine that they aren't talking with like full clarity or whatever. Just keep going, just keep moving, keep reading to them, and they will pick up things along the way. Ask the Lord to lead and guide you, and take an intuitive approach is my personal suggestion. People have different ways of teaching reading. I don't have the only right way. I'm sure you can find, like, there are literally, people whose whole job it is to teach kids to read, and they have Instagram accounts and YouTube accounts, and you can follow them, if you want their advice. But this is just my personal advice and what worked for us. So you know how to read, so you can definitely teach what you know. So don't be hard on yourself. Like, trust yourself that you can teach this skill that you have, Don't feel like, oh, I have to have a teaching certification or something like that. No, you know how to do it. So I'm sure that you can teach your child to read.